Well, good evening and welcome again to Warrington Borough Council live broadcast. This evening we'll be looking at the new restrictions that have been brought in Warrington and their implications for you, and also we're looking at how our schools are being supported by the council in order that our young people enjoy the best educational experience in these trying and testing times. I'll be joined tonight by Russ Bowden, leader of the council, Thora Raj, our Director of Public Health. I'm really pleased to see Louise Atkin, who's our Senior Advisor for Education and Early Help, with us today. So briefly, it's been a difficult week with lots of announcements and sometimes mixed messaging from the government, which is why we believe it's important we have these local broadcasts so that we can talk to people of Warrington about the issues that affect you directly here in Warrington. So the current government restrictions are the following. Public transport should be used for essential purposes only. Only 15 people should attend weddings, civil ceremony and receptions. Face coverings must be worn in hospitality settings when not sat at your table and in taxis unless you're exempt for health reasons. Hospitality for food and drink should be served to you by table service only. You may be aware there's a late night restriction on operating hours for the hospitality and leisure sector. And that means that they have to close at 10 o'clock and can only reopen again at 5 o'clock in the morning. People are advised, if you can work from home, please work from home. And people are advised from spectating an amateur sports matches and semi-professional sports, which I know has been a challenge for a number of sporting clubs in our community this particular last week. In addition, Warrington, because of the rise and spike in COVID cases, which Tara will talk about, we have some additional measures that have been put in place for Warrington since Friday of last week. These are, you can't host people who do not live with you in your home or in your garden. You can't meet people who you don't live with in their home or their garden, whether they're inside or outside the locally affected areas. That means outside of Warrington. You can't meet people you don't live with in any indoor setting, whether inside or outside of the affected local areas. That gives, there are some exemptions, including schools and COVID secure workplaces. So you can only go for a drink or a meal with somebody you actually live with who's in your household bubble. And you're also advised not to meet people from other households outdoors, although it isn't against the law, that's advice. So a whole series of messages that have been conveyed to the public of Warrington this week by ourselves and by government. So I will now move on for Tara to explain as to why those restrictions, additional restrictions, were brought in as from last Friday. Over to you, Tara. Thank you.
I think you'll all have noticed that Warrington's numbers have gone up, but we're not the only one. That doesn't mean to say that we can just rest. I would like to say I still see people smiling even behind their face coverings. So I think there's a long way to go, but if we keep smiling, we'll get there. Our numbers are doubling every fortnight. You'll see, and we get an inkling of what's coming. We get unpublished data that tells us that over the last 7 days, about 2 in every 100 people tested positive for COVID in Warrington. That's over 400 new cases in a week. Now, the reason I've focused on giving you unpublished data is because we heard over the weekend that there was a backlog of cases that came flooding in. Normally, we only give out what's called validated published data, and that's usually about 3 or 4 days old. But I felt it was really important now to give you a current picture. So there was a big jump, and we've been assured that over the weekend, all those new cases, they did actually get their results. And it was only in the last few days that there were big jumps. So we think that there's still time for those people who they've come into contact with to get a follow-up call from the national team in order to self-isolate. So this means that we still have a long way to go, but I would like to say a few thank yous. I mean, I just see the efforts that people are putting in. I'd like to say to every single member of the cleaning community across Warrington, they're just working so hard. You are doing a fantastic job. Keep going, because you are helping to keep our infection rates down. The other big thank you is to all of our residents, doing a fantastic job keeping to the rules, keeping to the new rules, because they keep changing. And you can never really sort of think, oh well, which rule is in today and which isn't. So it's important to understand the principles, which is about social distancing, good hand hygiene, and making sure that you are washing your hands, etc., and wearing face coverings where possible. So the new rules are important, but just keep going. It's important to have a plan. So rather than focusing on what we can't do, just be thinking about what we can do. I've been hearing some pretty amazing stories. Halloween is coming up. It's not everyone's cup of tea. I love it. And people have been telling me that they're going to be putting a pumpkin outside their house or something spooky. And it means that every time one of those is spotted, somebody can then just help themselves to a bucket of treats. So that's quite an interesting idea, isn't it? Another thing that people are doing is that having a cup of tea and a chat, either online or picking up the telephone. They're keeping that going. It's not the same as seeing somebody face to face, but it keeps people's mental health boosted. The other thing that people are doing is, because you're not able to mix in households, is they're starting to get their pens and papers out and writing each other's notes. So a lot of grandparents are receiving some really nice notes and they're writing back to their grandchildren. It's a bit old school, but it really is quite a nice thing to do. We still keep the family quiz nights going. They've moved to a monthly basis. I could quite easily get rid of them because our family are just abysmal and we always get 0 points, but whatever. We just have to keep going with the rules, because together we can keep Warrington working. Our schools, our businesses, our care homes, our hospitality sector are all doing a fantastic job. We just need to, we're going to hear from Louise shortly about education. We really don't want to go back to the days where our schools close and our kids are at home working online. My daughter said to me during lockdown, "Mum, I'd rather have the worst teacher I've ever had in my life than carry on at home." I mean, that's saying something if we can all remember the worst teacher we ever had. So, we don't want to go back to online lessons. We just need to keep going. The new rules are on our website, as well as our case rate. Just keep going, and we'll hear from Louise shortly. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Tara, for some real practical advice there. Thank you very much. And I move to Louise Atkins, who'll talk about how we're supporting our schools and our young people and the teachers and head teachers. Thanks, Louise.
Thank you, Stephen. So we know that it's a national priority to keep our schools open. We know that if our children have significant periods out of our school, that this can negatively impact their life chances in spite of all our best efforts at homeschooling. Not only does school provide education for our children, but it also provides important social and emotional well-being. And as Tara says, we want to maintain that in Warrington. Health and safety has been a core principle for all of our school leaders, who are working incredibly hard to put together robust risk assessments to protect not only our children, but our staff and our most vulnerable in our school communities. Settings are put in place robust protective measures, and these include making sure that individuals who have coronavirus symptoms don't enter the school premises, anybody who's unwell stays at home, making sure that children and staff clean their hands more frequently, ensuring robust respiratory routines, making sure that there are more frequent opportunities for enhanced cleaning across schools, and wherever possible maintaining social distancing. You will have heard your children talk about the bubbles that they are in to make sure that their contacts are limited, and this as well protects our most vulnerable and our staff in schools. We are so proud of our schools and the way that our school communities are pulling together during this time. We speak to school leaders every day who tell us how well our children are adapting to these new environments and the new ways of working. We know that there have been cases in Warrington schools, and leaders have acted swiftly and on the advice of public health services to make sure that they put in place robust measures and make sure that the safety of pupils and staff is at the heart of their decision making. There are different things happening across our settings. So in some cases we've needed to close settings, and in other cases we've been able to isolate bubbles or individuals. And it's really important to make sure that those cases are taken on an individual basis so that we get to the heart of the risk assessments for our schools communities. This isn't just happening across Warrington, this is happening regionally and nationally, and we understand how difficult this is for parents to manage, but we feel that at the moment this is necessary to keep everybody safe. I myself, like Tara, have 3 children, and I'm proud to send them to Warrington settings, one in a primary school setting, one in a secondary school setting, and one who takes an hour-long bus journey to a college every day. They tell me how important their school is to them, as Tara said, and also I know firsthand how well they're adapting to these new environments and the new ways of working. I really feel that it's important that for this so-called COVID generation, that we give them every chance to thrive and that they don't suffer any more disruption of their learning. Thank you, Stephen.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Louise. Now pass to Russ Bowden, Leader of the Council then, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And I'll start tonight's broadcast with a message I've repeated many times, which is thank you. And I genuinely mean that. Thank you to everyone in Warrington for the hard work that you've put in over the last few months, and particularly over the last couple of weeks in this time of enhanced restrictions. Obviously, we saw some changes at the weekend with some additional restrictions that have come into place here in Warrington and also in Merseyside. And it's really important that we all play our part to help stop the spread of coronavirus in our region. I want us to be kind to others, and particularly elderly and vulnerable loved ones. And that's really important that we protect them by continuing to keep and follow the rules that are in place here in Warrington. Of course, we all know and probably felt it over the last few days, but winter is definitely starting to loom around the corner, and we need to ensure that everybody is as safe as possible as we move into that winter period. We can all do that just by remembering to stick to those really simple principles, keeping our distance from others, maintaining excellent personal hand hygiene, and wearing face covers where necessary. And I do see a lot of people around Warrington when I'm moving about who are absolutely sticking to those rules, and that's a really positive position for us to be in as a community. Of course, with some of the changes, there's inevitable impact on our local economy, and people would no doubt have seen the news regarding, for example, the decision by Cineworld to suspend operations at their cinemas globally. We need to recognise that COVID-19 is having a significant impact on the global economy, and that filters down to what's happening here in Warrington. I'm absolutely committed to ensuring safety for our local economy, ensuring that it gets the right level of support that it needs in these very difficult times. And I'm pushing the government to ensure that our hospitality industry gets further support that it needs, or else we genuinely risk losing some of our local businesses and people being out of jobs and losing their livelihoods. I can't simply stand by and watch this happen. The government's furlough scheme, for the most part, can be considered as a success, but we've so far failed to see any kind of adequate replacement for it. And my fear is that furlough will have masked a lot of job losses to come in the run-up to the winter period. Alongside that is obviously the amount of support that local businesses have been getting from government. Again, we saw some positive action in the early days of lockdown in terms of rates relief, but also small business grants, which helped to keep the wolf from the door for many of our businesses. Here, as we move into enhanced restrictions and the potential of yet more months of COVID-19 having an impact on our daily lives, it's more important than ever that government finds the funding resources again to support our local businesses. I'll therefore keep pushing government for the support that we need as a town, that individual businesses need to keep their doors open, and obviously in the interest of protecting jobs here in Warrington. And I'll obviously keep you posted on the outcomes of those discussions with government over the coming weeks. Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Russ. Now we're moving into some of the questions that have been submitted by viewers and from members of the community. The first question, I think, is for me. It's from Ruth in Chapelford. The question is, would you consider pushing for the idea of a circuit break lockdown, such as advanced by Merseyside in the last week? To answer your question, Ruth, no, I don't think we would support a 2-week circuit break and lockdown, because it would mean closing down hospitality and the leisure industries entirely for another 2 weeks. We think that would be detrimental to their businesses and detrimental to jobs. The only way we could consider a circuit break is if there's advanced funding for those businesses. It's really important that our businesses are continue to be supported financially. So we don't support a circuit break lockdown. We do ask people to abide by the restrictions and the regulations as we've outlined today, and advised by all the public health messages which are coming from government and have been supported by the council. Next question is to Tara from Mark. This has come via Facebook. How up to date is the data of actual cases? Are you playing catch up on the delayed test results? And how does a rise in cases correlate to hospital admissions levels in Warrington?
Thanks, Mark, and everyone who's thinking the same, having the same question. Essentially, I started off by saying what our current position was. We do publish data that's about 3 or 4 days old, because that's validated data that's given to us from the national and regional teams, but I would have shared with you our current position. So nationally, there is a catch up on the new cases that were unearthed, and unfortunately, some of those people's contacts, they'll be contacted too late, because it's past the number of days that you'd need to do something about it. However, we are assured by national government that the bulk of the new missed cases were over the last few days. So the National Test and Trace team are contacting all of those people who were contacts of the confirmed cases to advise them to self-isolate. So how does that translate into hospitalisations? So we are seeing an increase in hospitalisations. They are happening. I think they're roughly about just under 20, but rising. We're not seeing yet the corresponding death rates. I would like to say that we should, we won't see any, but that would be, I think that would be a stretch too far. Unfortunately, with hospitalisation increases, we are likely to see the consequences, which is admissions to intensive care and sadly fatalities. We need to do more we need to do more along with everyone else, and we need to kind of keep going with the rules. I think if you wanted to sort of ask me, am I hopeful? Winter is always a difficult time. We know that it's going to be a difficult time, and we probably need to be thinking about how we're going to do what we need to do, how we're going to achieve what we need to achieve between now and the end of March at the earliest. It's not a short-term fix, it's a longer-term solution for each of us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tara, and thanks very much, Mark, for your question. I'll move on now to a question from Martin in Birchwood. This question goes to Louise. I always feel conflicted dropping my kids off at school. What guarantee is there that they will be safe?
Thank you. Thanks to Martin in Birchwood for this question. I drop my children off every morning as well, Martin, and I need to reassure you how schools are working to make sure that their settings are as COVID secure as they possibly can be. Whilst we can't say that they're risk-free, we can say that schools have put in place robust measures to make sure that the risks are minimised. And this isn't just unique to Warrington. The cases are happening across the country. You've heard me talk about the bubbles to minimise contacts in our schools, so our children are not mixing in the playground as they used to. Children are now sitting in rows, forward facing, and wherever they can, these risks are minimised. What I would say is, what I said before, is that this is an important and appropriate learning environment. It's essential for our young children, this next generation, to grow and learn, and keeping schools open is an absolute priority for us. We are so proud of the work that our school communities are doing at this time to provide education in extremely challenging circumstances, but in as safe an environment as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. And a question now from Carolyn in Stockton Heath. This, I think, question's to Russ, please. How long have we got the restrictions in place for? And most importantly, what is the exit strategy, Russ?
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to you, Caroline, for this really important question. It's a question that we've consistently put to government, particularly over the last couple of weeks since we moved into enhanced restrictions. And we wanted to be clear what was the exit strategy from those local restrictions. I heard a phrase last week about this being like Hotel California. What we don't want, of course, is to enter into enhanced restrictions and never move out of them again. And it's clear that unless we've got a national plan, it's going to be really difficult to apply a local approach. And I know this is a question that many other councils are already asking. We've heard talk of government in terms of a three-tiered approach. I think that would bring some clarity, but this has been in the offing for a number of months now, and still no clarity really about how it will be applied. One really positive thing about last week was that I was engaged in a number of meetings with government officials and public health and Department of Health officials, and that signalled to me that government was finally recognising the role that local councils had to play. And we were getting some genuine consultation and dialogue and discussion on the big issues that were facing our town and the region more generally. Of course, what we all need to do positively is to reduce the number of cases here in Warrington, and that needs to happen first before we can have any talk of easing the restrictions. And that's why it's really important that we all continue to play our part, as I said in my comments earlier on. Councils have very much been the front line of this response to COVID-19, and throughout the pandemic, I think they've gone above and beyond the normal duty, regardless of the role that they play within the council and within our community. I really do think that the government now needs to recognise the important role that councils can play, that it uses that local knowledge and intelligence and experience about what happens here in Warrington, about the nature and context of COVID-19 here in our town, and that we'll be properly engaged in coming to decisions and restrictions regarding our local measures. It is really important that we understand what the exit strategy is, what's the threshold that we need to get to before government will consider easing the restrictions on our town. And we'll continue to work with government to have those conversations, to be properly engaged with the process in making those kind of decisions. I look forward to updating everybody in Warrington on the progress that we're making, and obviously a positive direction of travel regarding easing these restrictions and getting back to more of a sense of normality here in the town. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Russ, and thanks Louise, and thanks Sarah. So thanks for joining us for this evening, and there's a great community spirit here in Warrington. I know working together we'll beat the bug and deal with all the consequences. So see you on the next broadcast. Thank you.